Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Azazel. This daily started out in a really good direction, because we were Azazel, we were due for a good daily, and we started out with the goal to, not shoal, but the other one, it is the shoal, what am I saying? Yeah, so we were going to the shoal, which is pretty good, but the first active items that we found, it really got me excited, because it's the brown nugget, and it's an item that's, I think, very underutilized. It's a very fun item to use just because of how proactive it is, but not only that, if you can get it working and really in a good position, then there's just a huge storm of flies shooting at enemies. So what this item does is essentially every time you use it, you're gonna leave a blue turret fly to shoot for you, and whenever an enemy comes near you, or near the enemy for that matter, it's gonna start shooting it and just gonna start dealing damage. I think its damage is capped, or it has a base of 2 damage, so it's not a lot, but the real power of this item comes from the fact that it recharges constantly. So you use it, and then it recharges, it takes like 10 seconds, maybe a bit less. To recharge it, you can place another fly, and you can essentially do that infinitely many of times, and you can have essentially an infinitely many amount of the turret flies which shoot at the enemy. So it's a very good item if you're fighting something like boss rush, which naturally takes a long time, or maybe harsh, or just any of the bosses which require a lot of time to take, and you just spam all of these flies. And you'll see it in boss rush, there were like something like 20 or 30 flies at the end, and they were actually dealing quite a sizable amount of damage. I placed them on the spawns of the bosses, so to the left and to the right, and they actually went to town and were pretty effective in that situation. They even work in a situation where maybe you're just going through the notions very early on, when maybe you want the fly to deal with one side of the room and you want to deal with another, and then maybe that just gives you a little bit of a boost. In essence, it's not a super good item, in all fairness. It doesn't really do much, but it's a fun one, and just for that reason, I enjoy it. It's also very good in greed mode, although I really can't show you that right now, but that's essentially just because you fight all of the enemies in the very same room. And I like that there are items which maybe seem weak, but have some niche uses, even in regular runs. So for example, fighting boss rush. And other than that, it's still a pretty cool item, but it's just not super good. And of course, if you get something like 9 volt, I believe then it starts recharging a bit faster, so you can place more flies on the ground, and then maybe you can eke out 2 or maybe even 3 flies when you're fighting just a regular boss, and maybe in that situation it's a little bit better. But it's definitely one of those items which I really enjoy just using and just playing with, because I think it provides a nice contrast to the usual items, which are usually very straightforward. So, for example, the Necronomicon, you walk in, you press the spacebar button, and everyone dies. But this is much more proactive. You have to think about the positioning, and then how much damage it does, and maybe you want to use it for more strategical reasons than necessarily to just kill enemies. And for that reason, I think that's why I like it. I said that already, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But besides that, this run was decent. I did mention at the start, this was a very strong run, and it was one of those runs we just had everything. Usually when you're Azazel, you do struggle with some things. For example, maybe your tear rate isn't as good, maybe your range isn't as good, so you have to get close there in personal. And it really depends on which bosses and enemies you fight along the way, because some enemies, or some room layouts, maybe to say it better, are very unfriendly if you don't have a lot of range, and in those situations you can end up taking a lot of damage. But thankfully, in this particular case, we had none of those rooms, and even if it did, we did have some range upgrades in the form of Roid Rage, and also at the start I think we got Mom's Pearls. Yeah, it was Mom Pearls, so that just gave us a little bit of range, and later on I also got some range upgrade pills. And not a lot of people know this, but the range of Azazel's Brimstone does increase, even if so slightly, but it really does help. For example, when you're trying to kill the bomb flies, or any enemy that explodes for that matter, you can shoot them from max range and still damage them without really being in the way of the explosion. You can do that with base range as well, but it's just significantly harder. So yeah, it was a good daily, and we also got in our eye, we got the 2020 item, so we're essentially shooting 5 shots now. The only problem that I have right now is that our tear rate just isn't that good, and what we have to do now is maybe hope a bit for luck. And the fact that we can kill most enemies, or maybe most rooms, in just one barrage of 5 brimstone tears coming from our face. And that's really effective, because obviously they do a lot of damage, but it's quite hard in the rooms where maybe enemies split into more enemies. Fistula comes to mind, just because you have to stop charging, because of course the spiders, maybe the chargers, can end up getting you, so you have to move out of the way where you'll still charging, and then you have to charge again. So having a passive item to deal damage for you is very useful. So for that reason, I did decide to buy Spider Mod. I have Succubus, and also picked up Sissy Longlegs, and all of those will just kind of help me out to clear the rooms out. Obviously Succubus being the most damaging and the most effective in this situation, but it really does complement this style of build well, and this is something that really wasn't possible before, because if if you just picked up Brimstone and of course the quad shot and triple shot or the inner eye or whatever, you would be left in a very bad position because you wouldn't be able to charge fast enough and you would just end up taking damage in that meantime. And maybe sometimes what happens, you get a bit too overzealous and you release early and then you have to start charging again, and that just adds up to be a mess essentially. And it's nice that we have these options now that you can rely on this high damaging, low tear rate shots, just because there are other items in the game that complement that playstyle well. And of course, when it does work, it tends to be pretty good. You can imagine that this particular style of build is also very good against Hush. It might not seem that way because you would think that you're trying to do as much damage as possible, but with how Hush's armor works, it actually starts resetting when you stop dealing damage to him. So what ends up happening, you do a barrage of damage, he takes a lot of damage, and because you have to charge for like 5 seconds after that, that shield kind of drops off and he loses that armor, and then you actually do more damage to him again. This is very apparent when he hides underground and when he comes up again, and if you're ever kind of paying attention to his health bar, you would notice that when he spawns and after he's been underground for some while, he actually takes significantly more damage than if you're just kind of shooting at him constantly. And that's exactly the reason why his armor works, in the sense that it refreshes, or maybe he drops the armor when you're not shooting him or recharging him. And you can see that I'm actually dealing something like 5%, maybe even a bit more of damage every single barrage, and obviously against Hush that's really good. I did get hit twice, which wasn't ideal, but at least we got to it with somewhat safety. Another thing I would like to point out here is you notice I have the left hand, and the main reason for that, I was just going hard for it. Early on, we don't really have a lot of keys, so I decided that maybe it's a good idea to stick with that, hoping for some pills, but obviously hoping for that Guppy transformation. And I stuck with it here for the first 2 floors, just on the off chance that maybe one of those chests is gonna be a red chest that's gonna give me the last Guppy item that I need, but it didn't really show up, so I decided to drop it in exchange for the matchstick. And the main reason for that is just because it's such a big floor, I don't want to lose out on too many points. I have Guppy still, I have the golden key in this situation, I just want to open as many chests as possible, hopefully get some cards as well, or maybe even rooms so I can actually utilize my blank card to its fullest effect, but that's secondary. The main reason is just getting a lot of points, or trying to get as many points as possible, and I think it was the right decision to make it in the particular instance. Obviously getting Guppy would be useful, it would be very good for just our damage clearing opportunities, but when you think about it, we're facing on average weaker floors than we would on Shoal, so we really don't need more stopping power. We do need more points, however, just to kind of rank better, and that's exactly the reason why I decided to drop the left hand. And the matchstick obviously also helps in that sense that it's gonna give us more bombs, and bombs are more worth than pennies because they give more points, but also because we already have 99 pennies, so we really don't need more money, so it's just gonna kind of work out in our favor. Here I'm of course just scouring through, trying to not fight Delirium. I thought that this is not gonna be Delirium for sure, but it ended up being, which is a bit of a bummer. I decided to fight him, and the main reason for that was just because when I entered the room, the what is it called, the item that gives you invisibility, that allows you to fly, I'm not sure, but it gave me invisibility, the shield, and I thought, you know, I'm gonna get in there, just see how much damage I can deal to him. And I managed to deal a quarter of his damage in just 2 barrages of Brimstone shots, so I figured I had a good chance against him, but of course, telefragging Delirium really, you can't predict it, and he's gonna come out of nowhere. He starts moving very rapidly fast, especially later on. There are too many bullets in the screen in order to you to get close and personal with him, so I would say that it's just impossible to avoid most of the damage that he would inflict on you. I think it's a really poor design boss battle. This is something that people have said in the past, but even now I just feel like there's no way to really do anything, especially when he gets to his lower stages, when he starts teleporting around and moving much more quickly than he did previous to that, and then really there's nothing you can do other than eat damage. So I did take like 1000 or maybe 2000 extra damage penalty on top of that, but overall I still feel like I played pretty well. You can see that my damage penalty, if you exclude this blunder at the end, isn't super high, which is extra good. My exploration bonus is quite decent, and all in all I managed to get the both rushes. I finished the run. 46,000 points for a run that goes to Shoal is not too shabby. I was surprised that so many people actually were ahead of me, but that's how the daily goes. It was a strong daily, a lot of people played well, some people played better than me, and there's no shame about that. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.